welcome back to a Tuesday morning on your Feel Good Breakfast show. And of course, every Tuesday we take some time to reflect on medical health issues, and this morning, no different. Now, according to the World Health Organization, South Africa has the 6th highest rate of suicide in Africa, with approximately 11.6 of every 100,000 people in the country completing suicide. Now, exam season, of course, is upon us, and according to the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, SADAG, 9.5% of teen deaths in South Africa are caused by suicide. And here to help us unpack what these statistics really highlight are Nicole Jennings, spokesperson from Pharmacodynamics, and of course, we're also joined by our trusted medical professional, Dr. Darren Green. A very good morning to you both, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, thanks so much.
Unpack this very important topic.
It's such an important topic to get into, and I think the first place to start is to make sure everyone knows that it's not for a specific type of person, but to also unpack who is really at risk of being depressed, of depression.
Yes, so, I mean, depression can happen to anyone. You know, it can be brought about by certain environmental factors. But there are certain people that are genetically more predisposed to develop depression. And in those individuals specifically, you know, certain life events such as, for example, intense exam stress and anxiety can bring about an episode of depression.
Yeah. When you say people that are genetically predisposed, are you referring to people who might have had a family member who suffered from depression in the past, and so it's likely that they might then suffer from depression?
It could possibly be something like that. You could also look at the hormonal levels in the brain. You know, there are certain people that have less of the feel-good hormones that are naturally produced in the body, and those factors will contribute to possibly developing depression.
All right. Let's go into it again, Dr. Green. I know that last time we did kind of touch on this a little bit, but of course for the purposes of this conversation, to highlight what the symptoms of depression are, so that one is able to identify them as not just a slump in your mood, or perhaps I'm having a bad day, but this is really something serious to consider as depression.
Correct. So there'll be a spectrum of symptoms that don't necessarily mean you've got the major depressive disorder. When it comes to having a disorder, it means that your activities of daily living and your functionality have shifted to such a degree that obviously you need help urgently. So functional shift is the big word that we use, and that implies the things that prohibit you from functioning as a family member, as a member of society, as a community member, and also as an employee. So that would include things like, obviously, your energy levels are too low. So that's the first one. So you won't have drive or motivation to get up out of bed in the morning and actually go to work. When you're at work, you can't focus, you can't concentrate, you can't complete tasks. Along with that comes obviously a lack of interest in pleasurable things and happy things and things that are hobbies necessarily for yourself. Isolation socially, where you extract yourself from public in terms of dinner parties and socializing with friends, because that just actually is too much for you at the time. You know, and then with that, obviously, your sleep can be disturbed, either sleeping too much and being exhausted, or sleeping too little when there's an anxiety component and being awake throughout the night. And then obviously your eating habits can shift and change quite a lot as well. All those factors combined then lead to your resistance mechanism starting to crumble in terms of coping mechanisms, which lead you to the depth that you fall into that dark pit that you're experiencing.
So let's say I'm sitting and I'm hearing all these different symptoms, and I'm going, oh, I've presented with so many of them, and I'm feeling that way almost all the time. What do I do? What's the first step? What do you need to do?
So generally, it's always advised to visit a qualified healthcare professional, because they can make sure that you get the right treatment, be it in the form of counseling or in the form of medication. But the first thing to do if you feel you're struggling with depression is just to reach out to someone close to you, reach out to someone you trust, and in most cases those people will uplift you and support you, and they will then, you know, help you in that journey towards your mental wellness.
So I suppose what you're saying is you can't self-diagnose. You can't say, I'm feeling really low, I'm feeling down, I'm sleeping a lot, I'm sleeping very little, therefore I am depressed now.
Often the insight's lacking. So what happens is your insight into your own behavior and functionality is often skewed. So you don't know that you're underperforming quite often. And you often have such good rationalization techniques of actually trying to convince yourself that you are coping, that you end up lying to yourself. And the people around you can see it, but nobody often has the guts to step forward and say, I see you taking strain, things are not going like they usually do. Is there something going on? Can I help you?
Yeah. A question that just came up in my mind now. So what if you don't have those close people that you feel you can divulge that information to for fear of being
100%.
judged, or whatever your circumstances might be. You might be one of your only family members in a very kind of long distance from where you are, where you live. How then do you go about it? And what do you say? Because I think a lot of the time people are scared of going, hey, I'm depressed, or hey, I'm feeling suicidal, or because then they're afraid that people might go, well, I don't want any part of this, or
you're weak.
or they don't know how to process it.
That's the stigma, exactly. And people see people admitting that they can't cope with any aspect of life as weakness, or the fact that you are just not up to the task. But what people don't understand is that everybody goes through seasons where your mood is affected. You have seasons that are natural responses to major changes in your life. Change of partner, a breakup, a change of a job, a divorce, moving places, moving into a new area, a new job. And all those things bring a sense of challenge with it. But what people don't realize is that those symptoms will pass. They see it in that moment as, this is for the rest of my life. And that's where they need assistance. So to get back to your question about monitoring yourself, I think, you know, having a good check-in where you actually become quiet and meditate and really look and focus on, am I performing, and being honest, and maybe even having, you know, calling someone on the phone can make a difference if you're stranded and isolated out there.
All right, we've got a caller on the line, Yvette, calling us from Johannesburg. Good morning, Yvette.
Good morning, Cleo. How are you?
Very well. Thank you so much for your call and engaging with us on this very, very important topic. Go right ahead with your question or comment, please.
I suffer with generalized anxiety disorder as well as agoraphobia. And the biggest problem that I've got is when we eventually manage to get out of the house, like for my pension, my disability pension, I cannot apply for that because there is no way that they accommodate us where we can go into a quiet room and that sort of thing. And I just find that when we go to the shops and we have a panic attack because there's so many people around, you feel like a clown. And I just wish that sometimes there would be a special queue, maybe a little room where you can go into, where we just accommodated a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you very much for highlighting that. I guess that leads to the question, is enough being done by authorities to create spaces in which people can talk about mental health issues, or perhaps be accommodated in certain instances where they would otherwise be faced with a pressure of being having to deal with these things that they can't. Is enough being done, or can more be done, Dr. Green?
No, I think quite a lot has been done. Some workstations even have, for example, tablets up where you can either vocally go and register and give feedback regarding to stresses in the workplace. Folks, it's all anonymous, obviously. There's no registration number that links one employee. But for them to get an idea of what's happening in the different sub-departments, a lot of companies are doing that right now. In this case specifically, you've got to be careful of potentiating and enabling someone's anxiety. Remember, giving them a quiet room won't help them cure the disease. Giving them tools to cope better in terms of working on their strategies, cognitions, and being able to cope in that situation is what we actually want to do. We want to equip them with tools that it can be a lifelong solution. We don't only want to look at one aspect of a generalized anxiety disorder. CBT is a very good example of that, cognitive behavioral therapy.
All right. Yvette, I hope that gives you a bit of perspective in terms of the type of work that needs to be done and that continues to be done by the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. More of discussions around depression and suicide when we come back from the break. 021-430-9881. Be part of the conversation. Dr. Darren Green and Nicole Jennings are joining us in studio this morning.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. It's your Feel Good Breakfast Show. It's a Tuesday morning. We are engaging in very, very important conversations here on our Medical Tuesday chat time. We're focusing on mental health. Of course, the month of October has also been designated to focus on that. And so we've opened our lines, 021-430-9881. Anonymous is on the line. Good morning, Anonymous.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for your call. What is your question or comment?
My question is, I've got a lady that's without a church group. She's suffering from depression for quite a long time now. She went to institution. We have tried to help her, but she's speaking of committing suicide again. What more can we do?
All right. So let's first just quickly, I think first I refer you to the suicide crisis line, which is available 0800-567-567. The information is on the screen right now, but let's also hear from Nicole and Dr. Darren Green.
Sure. So you go first.
So I think, the first thing to do is to make sure that this person sees a qualified healthcare professional.
Yeah.
So if someone from that group can take her hand and support her,
Yeah.
go with her and make sure that she is supported in that journey.
Yes.
Her doctor can then, indicate whether she only needs counseling, whether that would be a suitable solution, whether there is certain medications that can possibly support this process. But it's very important that a professional takes a look at this person and takes some steps there.
As possible.
As soon as possible.
Yeah, and I mean, she's obviously on treatment for depression already, given the history, but one must also understand that the degrees of depression can vary, and you even get a thing called, basically resistant depression, where people really respond very slowly to medication even. So I think it's important that we give her the best in terms of a multifaceted approach to curing depression.
All right, that line is on your screen right now, so please do take down those details. Keep them somewhere on your phone for quick access. These are real issues that we're dealing with that people are having to face every single day. And I wanted to ask about the fact that the other day on Twitter I read a story, but a true story of somebody who said that they were watching, or they were on suicide watch with a friend or a family member, and this family member tried to call the suicide line, and the person on the other side was ill-equipped to help them deal with a crisis situation right then and there.
Serious.
And hence why I asked the question initially, whether enough is being done by the authorities. Are we giving people the right kind of training? And I obviously know that you can't speak from an organizational point of view because you're not involved at all of these places, but perhaps if you could then maybe give a message to the people who are responsible for taking on this massive,
100%.
important responsibility.
Yeah, I think the training of people that have to sit, remember they are counsellors, they're not psychologists or psychiatrists, but there needs to be a very clear system as to techniques in how you come across on the phone, firstly, in terms of empathy, in terms of your tone, and so on, and how to also contain a situation that's chaotic for the person phoning. Often the caregivers are the people phoning as well. They don't know what to do anymore. They need very clear instructions as to if the situation is out of control and they're a danger to themselves or to the people around them or family members or even their children. This is the process you need to follow. You start off by calling the police line. You start off by looking at in your area and community. These are the places or the centres where you need to go. And there's certain documents that need to be filled in, that documentation in terms of certification, if someone needs to be admitted against their will to help them in a situation like that.
I think, also just to look at not making that person feel stigmatized.
Yeah.
Because reaching out is not a sign of weakness. It takes immense courage.
Yes.
So making sure in that situation there's no stigma attached and there's a lot of sympathy and just understanding for what that person is going through in the moment.
To be kind and gentle. But speaking of suicide, why do people commit suicide?
Yeah, so I mean, I see it often as a cup that overflows. If you can't turn off the water supply into the bowl of a toilet and it just keeps rising and rising and rising, if you're not going to stop it, it's going to overflow. And often the outflow of wanting to end your life comes in an inability to cope with life. And that then leads to the behavioral changes. People try also modifying certain techniques in their life, and when they start having hit after hit in terms of negative outcome, then they start losing that there's even hope of a chance of turning off that tap, that's busy filling you up in terms of stress, and also just everything that becomes too much in terms of your failures.
Yeah. All right, well, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation. 0214309881. And I want to ask Nicole and Dr. Greenham about the kind of conversations we should be having around dinner tables, the kind of conversations we should be having over weekend drinks with our friends to ensure that, at least within our own circle of influence, that stigma is broken down, that there is freedom to talk. And to show that sense of strength that Nicole was talking about earlier on. But one more time, 0214309881. Give us a call.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
All right, welcome back to our Medical Tuesday chat with Dr. Darren Green and Nicole Jennings from Pharmacodynamics. And we're focusing our attention on mental health issues, more specifically depression and, of course, the resultant suicidal attempts. And in fact, during the break, Dr. Green shared a very alarming statistic with us that every day in South Africa, about 18 men commit suicide. 1-8. All right, we'll reflect on that in a second. But right now, we've got Melody on the line calling us from Joburg. A very good morning, Melody.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Very well. Thank you so much for the call. What would you like to share with us this morning?
Just my journey with depression and bipolar. I was diagnosed the first time with depression when I was 21. And I was treated for depression up until I had my son when I was 28. After 5 months, I had postpartum depression. And I was then put on different medication, very strong medication that knocked me out at night. You couldn't wake me up even if you tried. I was like a zombie for years. And I tried to commit suicide 3 times. And then my doctor made an agreement with me and said, if you try to commit suicide again, then you need to find yourself a new doctor. So I started with him in counseling because he is a psychiatrist. But he also treats you kind of as a psychologist as well. You have like a half-an-hour session. So you discuss your medication, but you also discuss your problems. And he gives you advice, good advice. And I just at some point realized that, you know what, my son and my husband is more important. And I cannot leave my son without a mother. And the last time it happened, when I tried to commit suicide, was about 7 or 8 years ago. And since then, I haven't had a thought in my mind. My whole attitude towards life is different. I don't have the ups and downs that I used to have. I'm just a totally different person.
Yeah. Wow, thank you so
And-
much.
Thanks for
That-
sharing.
That's incredible.
That is-
And I think maybe that is a cornerstone of strength that a lot of people don't have. I guess in her case now, realizing that in attempting and committing suicide, possibly successfully, she'd be leaving her child behind, her husband behind, and a whole trail of friends and family who would miss her. And maybe that's what a lot of people suffering under that strain don't realize, that you will be missed. You do matter to so many people's lives.
Yeah, your sense of self-worth and your significance in terms of your ability to contribute, even as a role model and as a mentor to that child and to your partner is also, you know, it's not to be undervalued. And when you put on those dark sunglasses, when you have depression, and I always say it's like wearing dark sunglasses where you can't see the light properly anywhere. You know, to realize that's just an attachment that can be lifted is quite powerful.
It was also interesting that you referred to the combination treatment, you know,
Yes.
looking at the counseling together with the medication. So it's not always
Not just
just,
drugs, yeah.
just taking medication and now you're going to be better. And I just want to mention there as well that there's a lot of significant research that's been done that looks at lifestyle. You know, the brain is an organ like the heart is an organ. And just like regular exercise and a healthy diet and making sure you get the right nutrients can make sure that your heart is healthy, it also makes sure that your mind is healthy.
Wow.
So it really is about that holistic approach when it comes to treating your mental illness.
Dr. Darren Green, let's take it back to the caller. Someone like her who had suffered with depression and is now feeling better, are they still at risk of sort of relapsing?
Sure, so one would monitor your symptoms of depression, even although you've kind of got over the hump already. Remember that there might have been a seasonal kind of depression. She mentions a different diagnosis. She mentions a different mood disorder called bipolar, which swings between mania and depression quite often. Often a dominant either depressive side or a hyperstimulated euphoric side, which is the mania. So there'll be different seasons of those two alternating in her condition.
Yeah.
So remember that you know, you would be able to come off medication. It doesn't mean if you start on antidepressants that it's a lifelong thing, firstly. You do, however, have to look at a family history in cases where your body doesn't make or manufacture certain neurotransmitters over time. And then
Yeah.
you might need prolonged therapy. But multifaceted approach also increases naturally the neurotransmitters.
Yeah, well, thank you very much to both you, Nicole, and Dr. Green for joining us. And thank you to all our callers for sharing with us your stories. I think most importantly to remember that you are not alone. I know it sounds like a cliche, but just as with our previous caller noted that she realized that she does matter to someone, and you as a person matter to someone out there in the world. Their life would be emptier without you. So before attempting any kind of drastic behavior or suicide, the helpline is on the screen. Reach out, speak to someone. Do not suffer alone. And thank you very much once again to both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.